They call it a rocket ship. That's the word used by CEO David Hopkinson to describe Newcastle's 2030 vision. But in that second half in the Camp Nou, that rocket ship didn't just stall, it disintegrated. 4 goals conceded in 20 minutes, 7-2 on the night, 8-2 on aggregate. For years now, Eddie Howe has been made the face of this Newcastle revolution. But at the elite level, there is no room for sentiment. Tonight, Hansi Flick didn't just beat Newcastle, he exposed the gap between where the club is and where the owners demand they want to be. Let's talk about why the lights are fading for Eddie Howe and answer the big question: is he out of his depth when it comes to delivering on what the Newcastle ownership demand from this club? Now, Newcastle just lost 7-2 at the Camp Nou, right? And some people might be wondering why I'm making this video or why I'm being so critical on Eddie Howe. First of all, I wouldn't be this critical of Eddie Howe if the Newcastle CEO, who got appointed in, I think, September 2025, he came out with a quote during his inaugural speech where he said, by 2030, I see this club being in the debate about the top club in the world. This is not a 10-year project. The club and owners want to win the league by 2030. Win the league as in the Premier League. Now, the argument here is, if you want to be the best in the world and win the Premier League by 2030, can you afford to concede 7 goals in a knockout game? You need a world-class manager. And the question is Eddie Howe that man, or was he just the bridge manager? Now, this question has been lying around the Newcastle fan base for the better part of the last 2 years. Newcastle and their Saudi ownership feel like they want this club to be at the top of football. And by top of football, I don't mean just the Premier League. I mean they want Newcastle being put in conversations with the likes of Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Barcelona. But then there's always been this question of, is Eddie Howe the guy that can actually get them to the elite level? Obviously, there are top managers on the market right now, but some of the Newcastle fans feel like maybe Eddie Howe is the guy, but some other fans share the other side of the divide where they feel like Eddie Howe is not the guy to lead Newcastle to the next level. And after tonight, I'm inclined to share that opinion because today Newcastle went to the Camp Nou knowing that there was a world where they could get a result. And even if Newcastle didn't get a result today against Barcelona, right, the manner in which you conduct yourself will always be remembered. But that performance today, especially in the second half, I feel it wasn't just a Newcastle thing. It wasn't just a difference in quality thing. It was one manager being essentially out of his depth. Hansi Flick today outcoached Eddie Howe in that second half, and today the scoreline got ugly. I'll forgive you for thinking that was a cricket match or that was a basketball game. 7-2 on the night and 8-3 on aggregate. This is the heaviest defeat any Premier League club has incurred in the Champions League since Spurs lost 7-2 against Bayern Munich in 2019. Now, Newcastle actually fought back to 2-2 thanks to Anthony Elanga, one of the signings that I will touch on. But in the second half, where after Lamine Yamal's penalty made it 3-2 at the halftime, Barcelona scored 4 unanswered goals. Newcastle looked tactically out of it, personnel-wise out of it, and you want to get into the habit of thinking, yes, Barcelona are better than Newcastle, that's the case. But guys, in the second half, Hansi Flick made tactical adjustments. Eddie Howe did not make tactical adjustments. And on this level, the highest level of football, where Newcastle ownership want to be competing in, you can't afford to make those mistakes because big teams will make you pay. While some people this season will give Eddie Howe the benefit of a doubt, saying maybe it was an injury-ridden season. I know the likes of Sven Botman, Kieran Trippier, Dan Burn, Livramento, Lewis Smiley, Nick Pope, Elanga, Voltomade, they were out and they've gone through injury problems this season. But guys, today the back line was stretched. At the elite level, you don't concede 4 goals in 20 minutes because of injuries. You concede because your system has been figured out. And if the hierarchy want to be world class, they look at how Hansi Flick or Mikel Arteta have managed depth, and then they're going to look at their man Eddie Howe and feel like he's falling short. Today was a damning indication of that, and on no account should a manager who wants to be considered as one of the elites in Europe, should a football club who wants to be considered as one of the best in Europe, be losing 7-2 no matter the context of the game. Now, when it comes to Newcastle wanting to win the Premier League by 2030 and you've just lost today 7-2, how do you look at it? Because for one, you can analyze it as this was just a football game, but on the other hand, 7-2 is a scoreline that doesn't just hurt, right? It humiliates. In football, when the scoreline starts touching the 4s, the 5, the 6s and 7, then it gets ugly. And on a night, and in a Champions League night where you had Liverpool do an incredible comeback, you had Arsenal take care of business against Bayer Leverkusen, and then you have Newcastle picking up the pieces in Catalonia. The question isn't just then what went wrong tonight. It now begs the question, is Eddie Howe the man to take the club to the 2030 finish line? The CEO, David Hopkinson, called this club a rocket ship. He wants the Premier League by 2030. To get there, every part of the club has to be world class. The recruitment, world class. The stadium, world class. The hierarchy, world class. And the last but not the least, the man in the dugout has to be world class. I touched just now on the recruitment. As for some people, they might feel like this Newcastle side isn't one of the best teams in terms of talent. When they want to compete with the likes of Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Barcelona like tonight, they're not one of the best teams in terms of talent. But guys, in the Eddie Howe era, Newcastle hierarchy has invested over £400 million into his project. Today, they sit 12th in the Premier League. They just got humiliated on the Champions League stage. And guys, I can give you some of the names as the amount of money that Newcastle have spent, because contrary to popular beliefs, some clubs outside England might look at Newcastle and say, oh, they're just a mid-table club, they're not the part of the traditional top 6 clubs in England. But guys, Newcastle spend more than any other club in other leagues. They spend like a big team. If Newcastle were to go to the Serie A today, they will be the highest spending team. If they were to go to the Bundesliga, they will be the highest spending team. La Liga, they will be the highest spending team. I'll tell you some of the names that they've bought and the transfer fees that they've paid. Alexander Isak, 77.5 million euros. Nick Voltomade, 75 million euros. Anthony Elanga, 61 million euros. Sandro Tonali, 60 million euros. Johan Wissa, 57 million euros. Anthony Gordon, 45 million euros. Harvey Barnes, 44 million euros. Jacob Ramsey, 45 million euros. Bruno Gimares, 42 million euros. Tino Livramento, 37 million euros. And the list goes on and on and on and on. So when it comes to spending, Newcastle are competing with the best in the world. They're competing at that level. When it comes to fans, guys, we can't knock off the Geordies. We know they turn up. We know it's difficult to go and play in St. James Park. We know the fans are always uproar. We saw the first leg against Barcelona. This Barcelona was a team that was there to be got at. But tactically, at the highest level, if you want to compete and achieve these lofty, ambitious goals, you have to get it right. And that starts with the dugout. That starts with how he's set up. That starts with the team and the guy making those team sheets. Well, guys, I've said a lot and I've probably put perspective. Some Newcastle fans might watch this and they might agree with me and say, yes, they want a bigger manager. They want someone who is better than Eddie Howe, someone who's more proven on the European stage. Other Newcastle fans might look at this and say, oh, we want to stick with our guy. Eddie Howe has been at the start of the project. The Newcastle hierarchy gave a vote of confidence on Eddie Howe recently, and they said, yes, this is a guy that they want to lead the club. This is the guy they're backing. But guys, after tonight, very sure the Newcastle hierarchy will be rethinking their decision, because 7-2 on the European stage is embarrassing. In football, world class doesn't wait for injuries to heal. It finds a way. Eddie Howe ran out of ways tonight. Yes, guys, if you want to see more breakdowns like that, more tactical analysis like that, more in-depth analysis like that, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I'll be coming out with more videos highlighting Premier League players, highlighting players in other leagues, highlighting the biggest talking points in the European football stage. But yes, guys, it's been real. That's all I have for you guys tonight. Make sure you hit that like button. Comment whether you think Eddie Howe should be the guy in the job for Newcastle, or you think they can go and get a bigger manager and achieve some of these lofty goals. But yes, guys, that's all from me. Have a good night and goodbye.